Good day, good evening, wherever you are. I hope you're well. This is your Sensei Bob, and I'm coming to you on our channel, Dreamy Dreamland with Sensei Bob on YouTube. And right off the bat, I want to tell you, don't believe a word I say. I'm your griot. I just tell you a story. So I've been pretty much sleeping all day and throwing up. I'm throwing up the future, not the past. I've been dreaming about the past and how blessed I've been over all these years. And I've come to you in service to help you make the transition. So we have this, like the world is being very biblical, right? Almost scripted to the word, right? And, the green carrot is kind of like Pontius Pilate when that TV news person said, "So, Mr. President, do you take any responsibility for what's going on?" He goes, "No, not my fault. I wash my hands for the whole thing." And today, or the most recent news conference, he goes, "Hey, don't worry about things. It's all good. We got it under control." And then, Tony comes out and tells people how terrible it really is, right? And he leaves the stage, and he gets, he makes sure that all his people who are in charge, all the ones who are responsible, kind of all the ones who know what's going on, he has them like within 3 feet of him, right? That you're supposed to, keep 6 feet, right? He keeps all the important people right there, right? And the other day, he had all the corporate heads, and he was shaking their hand and touching the microphone 30, 40 times. And what it is, so, we have this pandemic happening, right? Our economy is crumbling, under its own weight. Our leadership is, we saw Bernie and Poodlehead, right? And it's like, really? That's what we have for leadership, And the people in Congress, the people in Senate, it's like, really? We're trusting these people with our lives. Holy moly. And the thing is that they're just, cardboard cutouts. And in Africa, they're having the worst plague of locusts in, known times. Well, oil is going through the floor, and it's like below $30. If it gets, it's already below the, danger, Will Robinson point. And, we have 9 wars going on, thousands of people dying every day. And, I have to go vomit. I'll be right back. Anyway, okay, I'm back. It feels good to vomit. Gets it out of you. I'm saying I'm vomiting the future, right? Not really sick. I ain't dying until it's time for me to go. So anyway, let's see. Put on my glasses, see who's here. Let's see. Hey. Well, I'm not sick. I just been vomiting the future. Okay, so there's all of this, biblical stuff on MSNBC and CNN, and that's not even the real story. Back in the day, when I came back from New Mexico, working at Los Alamos and San Diego and Kirkland Air Force Base, I said to my art friends, "Hey, we forget, anti-war, forget feminism, forget race. It's nuclear weapons. We're going to be dead. We got to stop this." So we started a thing called Adbusters, and started going after things. Hey, Jamie, good to see you, buddy. So when I came back and got involved in that, it only went so far. And I got involved in esoteric technology, the Theosophical Society, the Vol Society, mystery schools. And through that, I was part of a thing called the U.S. Psychotronic Society, right? It was about mind control and actually, the technology that is now controlling our minds. If you go watch Truth Stream videos or media, they have a really good show called The Minds of Men, right? And so I studied, and I had initially studied paranormal psychology in Duke University in 69 and 70. And I was working for a think tank called the SEAL Corporation out of California. And they became, the SEALs of the Navy. And all of the, basically what they were trying to do for DARPA was develop a super soldier, study Eastern religions, those guys who could put swords through their cheek and then pull it out and, a thing would heal in a matter of minutes. And, my little thing is to know stuff. Not to control things, but to know, right? Not to, because the only thing I serve is love's co-creation. And I, got into that at a very young age between my grandmother and Madame Olga Kluver and Billy Kluver. And Billy Kluver is a really interesting guy. He got a Nobel Prize for discovering the background radiation. He was at the Rad Lab with George Christie, another one of my mentors, and they both got Nobel Prizes. And Billy actually brought modern art from Europe to America. He did a art show called the Terminal Show. And 50, where the Museum of Modern Art is today, there had been an armory there, and he had done this. He brought Duchamp and all those guys, and exposed the art world of New York and America to that kind of art, and that's kind of where it got kicked off. So he was my mentor from 9 on. He was at the Council on Foreign Relations. He ran a thing called Automation House, which was the only door the public could get into, um, you know, the Council on Foreign Relations. When I was a little kid, my parents lived on 69th and Lex. And the Council on Foreign Relations was just down the street at 69th and Park. And so I used to take my dog to the park, and we'd walk right by this door, and it said Automation House. I said, And I walked in there, and there was Billy sitting, at a chair, just a table full of gizmos, and he was playing with them. And I said, wow, that's cool. And he looked at me, he said, hey, kid, look at this. And he was playing with holograms. And this was 1967, 66, maybe even 65. And he had lots of really exotic, that he would call foreign technology, right? He never used the word extraterrestrial. He always used the word foreign. And he had been involved in playing with this stuff since the 1930s, because the saucer that came down in Roswell wasn't the first. There were many others. So that's why they had it kind of together. And so I had exposure to a lot of interesting things from a young age. So when I, came back from Mexico and got my friends involved in the anti-nuclear movement, and revitalized it, and had big, concerts to stop nuclear weapons and nuclear power. Got involved in the Stop Shoreham campaign. I, was involved in these other entities, these mystery schools, but dealt with technology, if you ever saw the movie Hellboy, where the Nazis are screwing around on that island in Scotland because of heavy duty ley line going through there, and they were trying to break through the dimensional barriers, right? And the United States and England did that with the Philadelphia experiment. And so that's kind of what U.S. Psychotronic Society was doing. We were all guys who were interested in scalar technology. We all knew about Radio Row downtown, and as a young man, I kind of would go down there and get, Tesla radios that were not Hertzian, they were scalar, meaning multidimensional. And so we had laboratory. Preston Nichols of the Montauk fame had a lab out in Long Island. He was working for Sperry or some, and all those guys were. All my compadres were working for, exotic technologies out of Grumman Aerospace. And there were a few guys. I don't know. Lockheed might have been there, but there was Tesla had turned. That's why Brookhaven National Laboratories out there. He had his labs. He had turned half of eastern Long Island to one gigantic phased array. So it had a history, and so all these aerospace That was like and they were all working on a dimensional things, and that's what Brookhaven Laboratory was working on, biological weapons that were time traveled type of things, right? And so U.S. Psychotronic Society was made up of all these guys who worked on all these projects, right? And yet they didn't know, they thought they were just, working on a widget or something. But their minds were controlled and they were, and so I had fooled around with this Bernays and all that kind of mind controlled stuff at Duke. And so, Duke was 69, this was 74, 75. And so I kind of right off the bat said, these guys are really, really, really interesting. They were, so I was like being the anthropologist studying the natives, And out of that, there was a guy who was like our fearless leader. And he was a guy who, um, he had come from Africa, but he was a brilliant little kid and, from well to do folks in North Africa. What was his name? It'll pop in my mind. But anyway, he was our leader, right? And he worked at the UN. And so he basically would just get people to come and lecture, right? And he lived in a co-op kind of across from Lincoln Center. And they had a little social room down in the basement. And we'd have these lecturers, guys like, what's his name? The guy who wrote the book Beyond the Pale Horse. And lots of people, Stan Deo, lots of people, right? And then we would talk about we had this lab out in Long Island. We'd talk about our lab experiments to these guys. And anyway, his name flew by my mind. Anyway, so my friends from the Council on Foreign Relations would come over and talk to us. Billy Kluver, and he brought over his buddy George Christie. And George Christie's most famous for founding Telstar, and putting up satellites for communications and spying and all that. He worked for everybody, right? He didn't work for just one company. He was a guy who they bring in because he was smart, right? And anyway, what's that guy's name? I can see his face. But anyway, one time we were having lunch. The guy who was our fearless leader and George and Billy, and they said, you're constantly talking about alternative technology. That you've given up on politics, you've given up on spirituality, you've given up on on government stuff and business, and you're talking about this alternative aesthetic. We have to change how we're looking at things. And they said, that's a great idea. Why don't you, we will fund and sponsor you at the United Nations at an NGO, non-governmental office, right? I said, oh, sounds fun. So I went over there, and they gave me an office and a space and an assistant, and I got paid a bit, and I just started, through all the different organizations, I was starting to gather people that would come to the UN and speak to the UN about this alternative aesthetics, right? And it was interesting. They liked it. They liked anything kind of avant-garde. And man, I was the most avant-garde guy there. And everybody liked to have lunch with me. They had a really amazing dining room. And you went there, you sat down at a table, right? It was like family, big round tables, and lots of people would sit down, right? And I always got interesting people. Hey, can I sit with you? Oh, sure. And we talk about stuff. Um, and so I get different parts, different NGOs interested, and UNICEF was one, and because we kept coming up with ideas on how to make people I realized that bottles, Africa was littered with 1 liter soda bottles, and that they were clear plastic. And if you put water in them, put the lid on, and put it in the sun, the UV of the sun would kill all the germs. And then if you, had a funnel and poured that with some kind of, screen or something to take the gook out and leave it in the sun another day, um, you know, you would, right? You do it 3 days, and then you would have potable drinking water. And this place in Africa was covered in these things, so you collect all these bottles, and you just, stick tons of them. You go down to the stream, and you fill them up, and then they were easy to carry, and you'd bring them back to your shack, and you'd line them up, and you'd have 20, 30, 40 of these bottles that you were constantly, you know, emptying into an empty one and clean, and by the time the third day you had potable water. And it was like a really simple, beautiful idea, right? And UNICEF did it. They put it out there, and thousands of people did this, and they got clean water, and infant mortality started to go down because the biggest thing that kills babies in Africa is bad water. And what happened? Within 2 years, the manufacturers of these bottles put a substance into the plastic that kept the UV from going through the bottle because they wanted those people to die. Anyway, so I kept, and we did a few other things of that nature that were really simple, and UNICEF would put them out there, and they'd have a real positive effect, and then, within a month or a year or whatever, the powers that shouldn't be would change it so it couldn't help. And so I was getting a little, so I was saying, you know what? And this is how I work. I just kind of push the envelope. So I was, kept having nice people come and have lunch with me, and talk about interesting stuff. And I said, so why don't we have this, the internet, that's here. And, the only thing that kind of uses it is the military and universities. And why don't we, this guy in, you know, Stanford has just made the World Wide Web, meaning anyone can use the internet now. And these things called computer hobbyists are making computers that anyone, they're making kits that anyone can, make themselves a computer and go online. And anyway, so I was doing that. And the other interesting thing about my office, I had a box, right? And I kept getting papers, from Brookings and all kinds of places that they wanted to know my opinion on this or that. And I'll be right back. I have to go vomit again. Gotta go. Gotta go back. So anyway, so I got these papers that were quite interesting, but they were dry, and it's dry. But I started getting novels, right? And they were written by the CIA, and they did it, and they had a novel, and they would have like a thing to start it off, and they basically said that they're writing in a novel form so they can, disclaim anything. Oh, it's just a novel, right? So there was this novel about a thing called Alternative Three that, back, all through the mystery schools for millions of years, they knew what was going on. And, these occasions would occur where they'd have big floods and big earthquakes and, you know, you could have pole shifts. And basically, people would survive it because the folks who were the initiated ones, the mystery schools, knew it. And so they had underground facilities. And there were people who lived underground. I mean, came from underground. And so alternative three was, talking about the three alternatives. One is to try and mitigate the situation. One is try to, um, you know, go out into space and set up neighborhoods in asteroids and space stations. And there was a guy who had a project called L7 where he put amazingly large facilities in space because actually space is a lot easier, safer environment than under the sea or the ground. So it was called L7, and these things were big enough to have, they were like millions of people living in these, stations that went around and had gravity and the sun hit it, and they had grass and trees and everything growing. And they have a lot of those, Where has the, 100 billion trillion dollars gone since, 1929? That's what that crash was about. And that's why we have an economy that's based on boom and bust, pump and dump. And if you go to Catherine Austin Fitts, she puts it out very well. Right? And, Joseph P. Farrell, he puts it out very well. And Richard Dolan, he's quite a good historian about this. And, a good outlet for that is, dark journalist. right? So, so there I was, right in the midst of all this craziness, reading all this stuff. And one of the things I came across that, like catastrophes, it's the sun is the thing that really causes the weather effects and climate change is really the sun, right? Not us, right? Well, we affect things, we're like salt on a potato chip, but we're not really the big deal, and the stuff we do more to destroy ourselves because that's part of our, psyche. And so, enough of this. Let's see. So the mitigation, mitigation is, fluoride in the water, chemtrails, HARP, um, you know, the electromagnetic soup we live in, and the Internet of Things, all that stuff. Individually, by themselves, not so bad. Put them all together. It's, controlling the minds of the masses, right? Television, the media platforms, all of the above. And the thing about, so they understood the sun was causing effects, right? So back in the 50s, we put hydrogen bombs on missiles and shot them way out into space, right? And blew them off to have because hydrogen bombs are dimensional bombs. They're not just, splitting atoms. It deals with, you know, 0 point energy and such. And so we tried to screw with the sun. And in doing so, we're just stupid monkeys with matches. And we did some really bad things. But the other thing we found was we blew a hole in the sun, which we could use as a dimensional portal to other, solar systems, other dimensions. So we fly things through there all the time. If you look at, there's a guy who's got, he's stuck in a chair and he looks at every NASA, everything coming from space that he can get his hands on, he looks at, right? And he's really captured many amazing things. And if you Google that, like guy in wheelchair looking at everything in space and putting it on the internet, you'd probably get him. And so he's got images of, spaceships flying into the sun. So things are a lot stranger than you can ever imagine. And so one of these novels I got was The Real Story of Adam and Eve. And so they really took it all the way back, all the different demigods and gods, goddesses, and all the different, pretty much what's in the Bible, but from a different perspective, right? And one of the things that they're talking about is that every so often we have a, you know, electromagnetic thing from the sun that causes the poles to shift. And there's a lot of data, a lot of evidence, but the people who are scholastics stuck in a textbook don't want to even look at this stuff. The people who are the worst are the Egyptologists. You show them, hey, look at this. This is like science and common sense, and here's evidence. Oh, you're wrong. We're anyway. So all of these crazy things that are going on right now is to mask the fact that the sun is really going nuts and the electromagnetic pole things are really doing stuff that we haven't seen for 25,000 years. And so it looks like the poles are going to shift. When that happens, you're on the surface of the earth, it's got the wind, the air is going to be moving at like 20 times the speed of sound. And so, you're not really going to, when some Donald Trump goes, oh, don't worry, take it easy. He's right, you know, because if you're just sticking around, you know, and that happens, you like that, you'll be in the blender, right? Now, you know, for many years, being the electrician I am, I have stumbled into some pretty amazing things, and I've been in, DUMBs, deep underground military bases, right? And really, you should substitute military for hidden hand because most of these things are gated communities underground, and they have underground um, tube railroads. No tracks, but just a thing and anti gravity, and it kind of hovers in the tube, and they suck the vacuum out. And it's moving at 3-4 times the speed of sound, no friction, and no bumps. You just go from New York to London or Paris or Moscow, in 15, 20 minutes. The last Man in Black had an image of that, right? And so all the movies you see telling you things like that are pretty much true, giving you a heads up what it is. So, mm, that is on the near horizon when they're not telling anybody, right? So, I have been, I did a live chat last night at like 2 in the morning, and then I went to sleep, and I slept pretty much all day, like right up to today, right up to now, and uh, well, the devil's not in me. Uh, it's just the lies. Well, I guess the devil is in me. That's why I'm vomiting. All the lies and just really pathetic crap that's going on and coming to a hiatus right now. And the core humanity doesn't have a clue, right? And they're just being whipped up to be petrified. And this virus is heading to be, in the United States by July. I would say pretty much everyone will be infected, and maybe 60 million people will be sick. 20 million will be sick like they need to be in ICU, and we have like 100,000 beds in the United States for ICU because Donald and Obama and George W. and everybody all the way back to uh, Richard Nixon basically destroyed our health care. Actually, Richard Nixon wanted to have single payer. He saw what was happening and he wanted to have single payer, like England, right, had national health services. And the person who got in the way was Ted Kennedy because he wanted to be named after him, like Kennedy Care. He had a thing that he wanted to do, and it wouldn't be single payer. It would be more like Obamacare. Where do you think they got it from, right? And it would be basically putting money in the pockets of the medical enterprise, right? Military industrial hospital complex. And Nixon wanted to have wanted to have a national health service, and he wanted everyone to get good health care. I mean, that was Richard Nixon. Richard Nixon started the EPA. He started, you name it, Richard Nixon started it. And of course, that's why he got his ass kicked, right? We tried to do the right thing. Now, it drove him nuts. I mean, he was always the smartest person in the room because he came from, the wrong side of the tracks. People always made fun of him, and, you know, so anyway. So that's where we're at right now. We're at this time and space where we're right on the edge. And the only thing that will save us is love's co-creation. Because if we serve love's co-creation, things will work out. Right? Instead of worrying and freaking out and praying the devil, or because what's going to happen is that many people sick, they're going to get, oh, we got the cure for this. You get that shot, baby. Yeah, it'll, it will. You won't stop being sick. You just will. It's like diabetes. And right now, why I'm throwing up is that I can't put any medicine in my body. I throw it up. And I haven't really eaten anything in 2 days. Or I can't even drink water. All I can do is put water in my mouth and rinse my mouth out. But it's gotten a lot better, you know, because I would just think of it and I would throw up. Now I'm right. So next day, um, be able to drink water. But you know, uh, my guides are saying, listen, you need to fast. You're not fasting. You're still eating crappy food. So, we're going to do this. So you can't eat crappy food. So understand. I go for it. Right. And at the very worst, I'll die. And that's okay. You know, dying is like slipping out of a tight slipper. That's what Buddha said. Uh, oh, it says that no one can chat anymore. Anyway, that's 50 minutes and 23 seconds. It's almost 10. I think I'll go back to sleep. Okay. Anyway, yep, it says unable to connect to chat. Well, you guys were just sending me sweetie things, and I like that. Appreciate that. Uh, so I'm not really sick. It's just my guides keeping me from eating, and I'm throwing up the darkness. Get the devil out of me, right? So anyway, so go read my novels. At xratted.blogspot.com. Go. Uh, you know, read them and give me some feedback on what you think. Because those books, my novels, are just like the novels I got from the CIA, kind of based on what's going on, but changed a little. And you can get a hold of me at the dude awake 42 at Gmail. And if anyone could just throw a few dollars into my PayPal so my electricity won't get shut off, that would be nice. Because I have no idea about how I'm going to pay for these things once the real craziness goes on. But if you put it in PayPal, then I can puts it into a bank account that's hooked straight up to my electric bill. So, anyway, that's about it. Love you guys. Stay well. I'll try and get a hold of you in the morning.